Everybody, this is Kathlyn Hinesley with Exploring Dimensions for All, and today I'm going to be reading part 2 of chapter 11 of my book, Welcome to Infinity, Exploring Ancient and Modern Techniques for Collaborating with Otherworldly Beings. And in this part, I'm going to be delving into a hypothesis I have that I imagine could potentially be used for time travel, either by altering brainwaves or perhaps with the use of a machine. It's just an idea that I had. I'm not a physicist. I could be completely wrong, but it feels right to me. And so that's why I'm excited to read you this section. If you know more than I do, feel free to comment below. I can't vouch for this. It's just came in as an intuitive thing, and I really feel pretty strongly that at least some portion of this is correct and could potentially help people to travel through time in the future. All right, here we go. So, I wanted to just also mention that I'm picking up where I left off, and where I left off was me at the age of 25 going through a marketplace, carrying a baby, having lost my husband, and it was the fulfillment of a vision that I had had when I was 8. This was but one of several times I would see events in the future before they occurred. Naturally, I began to wonder about the nature of time as we perceive it, and whether or not it is, in fact, linear. Some of these precognitive glimpses had turned out to be 100% accurate, while others had proven to be mere versions of the future, intuitive pictures that were close in substance to what eventually occurred, but slightly askew with regard to details. I'd often wondered about this too. Why did I perceive the future very clearly at certain times and less clearly at others? Throughout my marriage, for example, I grappled with a painful vision I'd had in China, a vision of seeing my husband lying dead in a coffin. Strangely, the vision had been a comfort to me at the time I'd had it. While preparing to leave China the first time, just after the massacre at Tiananmen Square, I was greatly distressed because I feared I'd never again see the man I loved. Then, while walking back to my apartment one afternoon, I had a daydream so strong it stopped me in my tracks. In the vision, I was standing in a large tool shed made of plywood. I was with my daughter, who came up to my ear in height. I guessed she was 12 or so. I sensed we'd traveled a long way to be there and wondered if we were back in China. I reasoned that we probably were, as a coffin certainly wouldn't be stored in a tool shed in the United States. I placed myself in my late 30s or early 40s. In front of me was my fiancé, older too. There he was, lying in a coffin with a white interior and shiny black sides. His hands were crossed over his belly. My mood was sad but accepting. His death had not been unexpected. I'd traveled with my daughter a long way to be there. I knew we'd been married, had a daughter, and later divorced. I was living with a man back home, but the relationship wasn't going well. As I stared at my daughter's father in the coffin, I wondered why I'd left him. Our marriage hadn't been any worse than the relationship I was currently in. Many years later, but not long enough, the vision came true. Almost. We did get married, have a daughter, and later divorce, and then, to the sorrow of everyone who knew him, my ex-husband was diagnosed with terminal leukemia at the age of 31. Chemotherapy helped to prolong his life, but was unable to cure him, and we said goodbye for the last time when he was 34. During one of our last conversations, I admitted to him that I was very unhappy in my current relationship and planned to break up with my boyfriend and get an apartment of my own. 2 weeks later, my ex-husband's new wife called and told me he had passed away in a hospital on the east coast of the United States. My ex-husband didn't die in China, and he wasn't in his late 30s. Our daughter was 8 years old, not 12, and she only came up to my shoulders. My vision of the coffin was also inaccurate, as my ex-husband chose to be cremated rather than buried. But so much else, too much else, had been correct. I consoled myself with everything I'd read about death and took solace in some of the memories I'd had of other places and times outside of our familiar plane of existence. I remembered the flashing previews I'd been shown by the spirits prior to my birth, and recalled some of the memories I'd had of other lives. All of these visions of the future and the past had felt like the present at the time I'd had them. At the time I'd perceived them, as if I was seeing into experiences I'd merely forgotten about or ceased to focus on. I knew my ex-husband wasn't really gone any more than he had been before his death, or for that matter, before his birth. I knew from my experiences with precognition, supernatural voices, and memories of past lives that much existed out of the visible realm we call reality. I was sure there was a deeper, more unified reality that transcended the apparent divisions of time and space. Before my ex-husband's death, I'd begun to read various theories of time, searching for clues that would explain my experiences. And then, one day, the pieces seemed to fall into place. I was reading Future Memory by P.M.H. Atwater when a new understanding of matter, space, and even time itself clicked into place. Like myself, Atwater had had several unexplainable experiences with precognition. In Future Memory, she advances the hypothesis that her experiences and other instances of precognition may occur when a, quote, colloidal state, end quote, footnote 4, is created. So footnote 4 is P.M.H. Atwater, Future Memory, Charlottesville, Hampton Roads Publishing Company, Inc., 1999, page 153. Let's see, I've got to find that again. It's on this page over here. Okay. So let me read the sentence again because it was only part of the sentence, and it'll be easier if I read the whole thing again. In Future Memory, she advances the hypothesis that her experiences and other instances of precognition may occur when a, quote, colloidal state, end quote, footnote 4, is created, which allows for altered awareness or perception within the time-space continuum. Atwater carefully utilizes well-respected scientific theories to back up her hypothesis. As I read pages 122 and 123, an avalanche of thoughts cascaded through my mind, leaving me with a strange feeling that can only be described as total clarity. On page 122 I read, quote, "At the speed of light, time stands still," end quote, footnote 5. Reprinted from Future Memory by P.M.H. Atwater, copyright 1999 by P.M.H. Atwater, used by permission of Hampton Roads Publishing Company, Inc., page 122. This idea was of course not new to me. The concept has been woven into numerous science fiction stories in which youthful space explorers leave the Earth only to find upon their return that their loved ones have died of old age. But this time the sentence really threw me. If time stops, or slows down, or changes at all, I reasoned, if time, as Einstein thought, is relative, then it's not really real. Feeling shaken, but more awake than I had in years, I proceeded down the page. Quote, "Matter is most commonly regarded in the field of science as solidified light, appearing as form and substance because of its density and lower frequency of vibration." Footnote 6, Ibid. I grew even more excited as I thought I knew what Atwater was proposing. I later learned that Atwater had a theory that was entirely different from the one I subsequently came up with. Somehow, her words so stimulated my mind that I wove together another theory quite naturally, without knowing I was doing so. I stopped reading and let my mind race. I found myself weaving together concepts at a rapid pace. Information seemed to flow in so naturally. I felt as if I was drinking it. And there was that subtle fluid sensation again, the one I felt pouring into my heart when information came in and I just knew things. A rapid flow of energy seemed to course through me, as if I'd suddenly been plugged into an electrical outlet of some sort. I turned my head and stared first at the file cabinet and then at my arm, holding the book. Quote, "Matter is most commonly regarded in the field of science as solidified light, appearing as form and substance because of its density and lower frequency of vibration." End quote. Footnote 7. I repeated to myself, quote, "At the speed of light, time stands still." End quote. Footnote 8. Ibid. Matter is light, I explained to myself again. I was never very good at math, so this sort of thing was hard work, even if it was flowing in naturally. If matter is light, at a lower frequency of vibration, I reasoned, then my arm is light, the file cabinet is light, and everything in this room is light. We perceive it as matter because it's vibrating slowly. If the speed or vibration of light or matter affects our perception or experience of time, then the only thing that's holding together this everyday model of reality we cling to and our whole perception of the linear nature of time is vibratory rate. I wrote the above I wrote the above paragraph after fully understanding the theory I'm trying to describe, so don't give up yet if you don't get it. Here's how it came to me. I looked at my arm and then at the file cabinet in front of me. I reasoned that the matter, light, in both were in constant motion. The atoms and subatomic particles in the file cabinet were in constant motion. The atoms and subatomic particles in my arm were also constantly moving. All of this motion was occurring at a specific vibratory rate. Everything around me, the file cabinet, the bookcase, and my arm, were in constant motion. Quote, "Matter is most commonly regarded in the field of science as solidified light, appearing as form and substance because of its density and lower frequency of vibration." End quote. Ibid. I thought again. So my arm and the cabinet and the book and the walls and the house I was sitting in and the whole town I lived in all had a frequency of vibration and appeared as form and substance. Now, if the speed of light somehow affects time, I thought, couldn't it be that our perception of time is due to our perception of the speed or frequency of vibration of the light molecules that make up our bodies and surroundings? I thought about the file cabinet's condition just a few moments before. Its subatomic particles had been in a slightly different configuration. If I waited 100 years or so, the file cabinet would be quite rusty because of all of the interactions it would have had with the atoms and molecules in the environment. Instant by instant, I reasoned, I'm seeing a slightly altered version of the file cabinet. I just don't know it. To me, it seems like time is passing and the cabinet is standing still. What I am in fact perceiving is the movement of atomic and subatomic particles in all the things around me. Each configuration, instant by instant, is unique, and each corresponds to a specific juncture or coordinate in time and space. Suddenly, everything I'd wondered about seemed to make sense. If time is relative, it's not really real, I reminded myself. For the sake of convenience, I'll state the following theory, or what I can more comfortably call, quote, an intuitive understanding, end quote. That was just a set aside, not from anybody's book, as if it were fact. So let me read that again. For the sake of convenience, I'll state the following theory, or what I can more comfortably call an intuitive understanding, as if it were fact. I realize that many in the physics community will likely be able to come up with a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, but that I haven't thought of. And even the most non-scientific person may want proof that I'm not able to offer. Nevertheless, I believe that what I'm proposing as a model for a multidimensional reality makes good sense and is easier to explain when stated as fact than it is when attached to a lot of conditional words like perhaps, maybe, and possibly. These words are inherent in any new theory anyway. Thus, I admit them all from the outset. So here's an idea that makes a lot of good sense and explains a great deal of what we currently perceive to be paranormal experience. Our bodies and the objects around us are all moving at a similar frequency of vibration. We are able to perceive solidified light as matter because we inhabit bodies composed of matter. Our bodies essentially trap us in our everyday perceptions of reality. There is really no time. What we perceive as time is the vibration, movement, of our bodies in relationship with the vibration, movement, of all the things around us. We are all, in fact, solidified light that is beyond the trappings of time. We perceive movement in the world around us because we move. It is this movement that creates the sense of linear time. We don't actually perceive time in any real sense of the word. What we perceive is change. In his book, Parallel Universes, The Search for Other Worlds, physicist Fred Alan Wolf explains that, and then it's a long set-aside quote. So it actually starts here and continues over here. In Newtonian or classical physics, an object is believed to possess two kinds of attributes simultaneously. For example, a large object is pictured as having both a location and a momentum at each and every moment. Together, the momentum and the location of the object tell us where the object is and where it is going. 4 ellipsis dots. In quantum physics, dealing with tiny objects like atoms, electrons, and other subatomic particles, this is no longer possible. Such objects cannot be observed with both positions and momenta simultaneously. Footnote 10, sorry about that. Reprinted with the permission of Simon & Schuster from Parallel Universes by Fred Alan Wolf. Copyright 1988 by Universe Seminars. So that's spelled capital YOUNIVERSE, Seminars, Inc., from page 48. What I'm proposing is that time is essentially an illusion created by the simultaneous perception of positions of the atomic and subatomic particles of everyday things, and their momentum or change of position. This is easier to explain by using an example that involves larger objects in motion. Imagine that you've been waiting for a friend to arrive. Suddenly you see your friend's car turn a corner and begin to approach your house. In each millisecond that you watch, the car is at a particular position on the street where you live. But you perceive the car as being in motion and feel that time is passing as you perceive a series of those positions. By the time the car drives up to your house, you may have taken 20 breaths. Your heart will have beat numerous times, and you may have mentally rehearsed several things you plan to tell your friend as soon as he or she arrives. Your very essence has been moving, just like your friend's car. As matter vibrates, it changes. Nothing we see around us, because of the continuous motion of its subatomic particles, will ever remain exactly the same, even for a fraction of a second. The subatomic particles in the book you are holding are in a different configuration than they were 3 minutes ago. The book has aged, and so have you. Our bodies, I reasoned, are trapped in a frequency of vibration that is in harmony with the world around us. We're perceiving moving objects as though they were stationary, and our vision of them as solid is creating the illusion of continuity. Yet everything we perceive is in a constant state of flux. Could our sense of matter vibrating be creating the illusion of time? So what's the big deal? Well, if time is not real, then the past and future must necessarily coexist as specific energy positions or coordinates, if you will. All times and all places, whether in this dimension or another, must possess coordinates. In other words, if I were to stop the movement of subatomic particles in the file cabinet for a millisecond, the setup of particles within it would have a specific coordinate for that millisecond. If a future time traveler could somehow devise a way to read the subatomic configuration of the file cabinet at a specific point in time, he or she could theoretically transport him or herself into my room at that time in history. He or she could do this because everything at that time would be in a specific coordinate relationship to everything else at that time. The file cabinet would appear to be just sitting there. I'd be looking up from my book. Outdoors, the dog would be in mid-step, and a cold breeze would have just caused the leaves on the left side of the tree to bow forward. I thought a little more about matter being solidified light because of its slower rate of vibration. That meant that everything in the universe had to have a specific frequency of vibration in order to be perceived as form and substance. Logically, then, I'm perceiving things in my environment because my body possesses a frequency of vibration similar to that of the objects around it. It follows that it would be possible for me to perceive other times and other dimensions if I were somehow able to change the frequency of my vibration to more closely match the rates of those times and dimensions. Just because I didn't perceive any of these at the moment didn't mean they didn't exist. There could be other times and places, even entire universes out there, all simultaneously coexistent with our own. This would certainly help explain some of the precognitive visions I'd had. I'd simply been jumping into a perception of a different set of coordinates existing simultaneously with my own. I got so excited I called my ex-husband to tell him my thoughts. He'd been given 2 weeks to live a few months before and was hanging on to life by a thread. Somehow I thought the concept of simultaneous time would help cheer him up, and anything I could do to cheer him up seemed like a good idea. "It's okay," I said excitedly. "It's all going on at the same time. You're a little boy, and you're already dead, and you're in another life, and you're talking to me on the phone, and it's all going on at the same time. It's just that we're only perceiving part of it from here." "That would make sense," he said. And then he told me something he'd never told me before. "When I was a little boy," he said, "there was a movie about a Japanese guy who died of leukemia. The movie was very important to me. I taught myself how to play the theme song on the piano and then on the guitar. When I tried to discuss the movie with friends, it seemed everyone had forgotten about it, but the movie was very important to me." I suddenly remembered the time he gave me the book Love Story to read on the bus as I was leaving the University of Petroleum to visit my friend in another city. "This reminds me of you and me," he said. But when I read the book, I really didn't understand why. It was about 2 American students who met and fell in love. Beyond the differences in background the two had to grapple with, I really didn't see any similarities between them and us. And something about it really disturbed me. The girl in the story died of leukemia. Why had this book reminded him of us? So I should have put quotes around what he said and then continued with what I was saying. If that got confusing, you can just go back a little bit in the video to get the full picture. In retrospect, it seemed clear to me that my ex-husband somehow sensed a portion of his future in advance. When I suggested to him that this might be the case, he agreed that it was likely. Yet perception of the future suggests the existence of simultaneous time, or at least a concept of time that is far different than the commonly accepted linear model. Throughout my life, I'd been confused by the alarming accuracy of some of my visions and the blatant inaccuracies inherent in others. Why, I wondered, had some of my precognitive visions been so accurate and others so flawed? I began to think about several precognitive visions I'd had. I reviewed their similarities and differences, and realized that the flawless visions had had something in common. I noted that the circumstances surrounding the accurate visions I'd had often included the presence of stationary objects. Objects that existed at the time I'd seen the visions, and were still in existence when the visions were fulfilled. Up until that time, I'd had 4 precognitive visions involving stationary objects. and all 4 had proven to be 100% accurate. Okay, so the next part is going to be part 3 of chapter 11. Thank you for watching. Please give it a thumbs up if you like it. And I look forward to seeing you in part 3. Have a nice day.